will never forget the moment I opened my phone and saw him. My heart stopped. On the screen was a photo of my stepfather, completely naked. His confident, almost daring gaze drilled into me. The same gaze I had known for years, but this time it was different. So different. How did this photo end up on my phone? But let me start from the beginning. My name is Layla. I'm 23, and my life had always seemed normal from the outside. Perfect even. My mom married Nathan 5 years ago. He's 64, successful, charismatic, the kind of man who commands attention the moment he enters a room. Always impeccably dressed, his tailored suits hugging his athletic frame, silver streaks in his dark hair giving him that distinguished look that made women glance twice. But there was always something about him. The way his eyes lingered a little too long during family dinners, the way his hand accidentally brushed against my waist when he passed me in the hallway. I always chalked it up to my imagination. Until now. It was a Thursday, and I was running late to meet my friend Jenny downtown. In my rush, I left my phone on the kitchen counter. I never do that. I'm glued to it like everyone else, but that day, I guess fate had other plans. I should have gone back for it, but I didn't. The night was amazing. We went to this rooftop bar in the city, sipping cocktails, laughing about the dumb stuff we used to do in college. The city lights were sparkling below us, and for the first time in a while, I felt free. No weird vibes from home, no awkward tension. Just me, Jenny, and the feeling that life was good. By the time I got back, it was late. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mom had already gone to bed. But Nathan? Nathan was in the living room, lounging on the couch like he owned the place, which, to be fair, he kind of did. He had some papers in his lap, glasses perched low on his nose, that usual calm, collected look on his face. But when he looked up and our eyes met, something felt off. His gaze wasn't just casual. It lingered, longer than it should have. "Good night," I said, forcing a casual tone, but my heart was beating faster than it should have been. He didn't respond, just nodded slightly, eyes still locked on mine as I walked past him into the kitchen. I grabbed my phone from the counter. The screen lit up in my hand. A few missed notifications. No big deal. But then I saw it. A new photo. Curious, I opened it, and that's when my entire world tilted on its axis. Nathan, naked, standing in what looked like our bathroom. His body angled slightly, muscles defined, but it wasn't his physique that made my breath catch. It was his eyes, that piercing, direct stare, like he was looking right through the screen, right at me. I froze. My mind went blank. This couldn't be real. No way. Maybe he sent it to Mom, and it somehow ended up on my phone by accident? But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. The way he looked in that photo, the confidence in his expression, it wasn't meant for Mom. It was meant for me. My hands were shaking. I felt sick. My first instinct was to march upstairs, wake up Mom, and show her. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe fear. Or maybe it was something darker. A tiny flicker of curiosity I didn't want to admit. Why would he do this? What did he want from me? I turned off my phone and practically ran to my room, locking the door behind me. I sat on my bed, staring at the blank screen, my heart pounding in my chest. Every glance, every touch, every moment that had felt strange between us over the years, it all started to make sense in a way I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling as my mind raced through every possible explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he meant to send that photo to my mom, and somehow it landed in my phone by accident. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a mistake. And worse, some twisted part of me wanted to know why. Why would he do that? What did he expect from me? By morning, the house felt different, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting. I could hear my mom downstairs, her cheerful humming drifting up to my room as she prepared food for our family picnic. It was supposed to be a normal day, a perfect little getaway to our cabin in the countryside, but nothing felt normal anymore. I dragged myself out of bed, still feeling the weight of that photo in my chest. When I finally made it downstairs, Mom was in the kitchen, packing sandwiches with a bright smile on her face, completely unaware of the storm swirling around us. Nathan was by the door, loading the car with our bags. His movements were casual, effortless, like he didn't have a care in the world. But when I stepped outside to help him with the last of the bags, the air between us shifted. We were alone for just a moment. That's all it took. "You saw it," he whispered, his voice low, barely audible over the morning breeze. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. His words weren't a question, they were a statement, heavy and certain. I could feel his breath, warm against the side of my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. I could have screamed. I could have run back into the house, told my mom everything. But I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed, the weight of his gaze pinning me in place. My throat was dry, my mind a blur, but somehow, I nodded. Just a slight nod, barely noticeable. But it was enough. I saw the spark in his eyes, that flicker of something dark and dangerous that made my stomach twist. I didn't know if it was fear or something else entirely, but it made me tremble. And then, just like that, the moment passed. My mom's voice called from the kitchen, breaking the spell. Nathan stepped back, his face slipping back into that calm, collected mask he always wore. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just shattered the fragile reality I'd been clinging to. The car ride to the cabin was unbearable. Mom chatted away in the front seat, completely oblivious to the tension thickening the air. Nathan drove, his hand steady on the wheel, his expression neutral. But every time I glanced at him through the rearview mirror, I caught him watching me. His eyes would meet mine for just a second before returning to the road, but that was enough to send my heart racing all over again. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to calm the storm inside me. But it was no use. I couldn't escape the weight of his gaze. The memory of that photo burned into my mind. When we finally arrived at the cabin, I practically bolted from the car, needing to put as much distance between us as possible. I busied myself unpacking, helping Mom set up the picnic area by the lake, anything to avoid being alone with him. But Nathan was always there, hovering just at the edge of my awareness. His presence was suffocating, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something I wasn't ready for. As the day wore on, the tension only grew. We ate lunch by the water, Mom laughing and telling stories while Nathan sat quietly, his eyes never straying far from me. Every glance, every subtle brush of his hand as he passed me a drink, felt like a silent reminder of that photo. A promise of something more. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, fear, confusion, anger, and something else I couldn't quite name. A dark curiosity that both terrified and thrilled me. I hated it. I hated him for making me feel this way. But I couldn't deny it. Later in the afternoon, Mom went inside the cabin to grab a bottle of wine, leaving us alone by the lake. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting golden reflections on the water. I could feel him watching me, the heat of his gaze burning into my skin. "Why?" I finally whispered, my voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of the waves. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked over to where I was sitting, his shadow falling over me. My heart pounded in my chest as he crouched down beside me, his face so close I could see the flecks of green in his hazel eyes. "Because you're not a little girl anymore, Layla," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "And you know it." His words sent a jolt through me. I wanted to slap him, to scream, to run. But instead, I sat there, frozen, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that he'd said it, or the fact that part of me wasn't entirely shocked. Before I could respond, we heard Mom's voice calling from the cabin, and just like that, the spell was broken. Nathan stood up, brushing the sand from his jeans, and walked back toward the house as if nothing had happened. I sat there for a long moment, staring out at the water, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions crashing through me. That night, after dinner, I locked myself in my room, my mind racing. I could hear Nathan and Mom talking and laughing downstairs, their voices a cruel reminder of the secret now wedged between us. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day in my mind, every glance, every word, every touch. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up, but one thing was clear, this was far from over. And I had no idea what was coming next. The car ride to the cabin felt suffocating. My mom sat in the passenger seat, laughing at Nathan's jokes like nothing in the world was wrong. I sat in the back, staring out the window, feeling his eyes burn into me through the rearview mirror. Every time I glanced up, I'd catch him watching me, his gaze lingering just long enough to make my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to jump out of the moving car and run as far as I could, but I didn't. I stayed. I watched. And deep down, I hated myself for it. When we finally arrived at the cabin, I jumped out of the car before Nathan could even turn off the engine. The cool forest air hit me like a slap to the face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I busied myself with unpacking, dragging our bags into the house while my mom chatted away, completely oblivious. Nathan carried the heavier stuff, his movements slow and deliberate, like he was savoring every second of this twisted game. The cabin looked the same as always, cozy, warm, filled with memories I no longer wanted to remember. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, every creak of the floorboards echoing in my ears. I tried to keep my distance, but Nathan was always there, lurking in the corners of my vision, his presence suffocating. We spent the afternoon outside, pretending to be the perfect family. Mom set up the grill while Nathan built a fire pit by the lake. I sat on a blanket, pretending to read a book, but I couldn't focus. Every laugh, every casual touch between them felt like a dagger twisting in my chest. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream the truth, but I couldn't. Not yet. As the sun began to set, Mom went inside to check on something in the kitchen, leaving Nathan and me alone by the fire. The crackling of the flames filled the silence between us, but it did nothing to drown out the pounding of my heart. "I know what you're feeling, Layla," he whispered, his voice low and smooth, like poison dripping from his lips. His fingers brushed against my hand, sending a jolt of electricity through me. I yanked my hand away like his touch burned, my breath hitching in my throat. This was too much. I wanted to run, to get as far away from him as possible. But something in me, some dark, twisted part, wanted to see how far he was willing to go. "You're sick," I hissed, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and something I couldn't quite name. He chuckled softly, the sound sending chills down my spine. "You can pretend all you want, but we both know the truth. You feel it too." Before I could respond, Mom's voice called out from the house, breaking the tension like a knife through glass. Nathan straightened up, his face slipping back into that calm, collected mask he always wore. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Dinner was a blur. I could barely taste the food, my mind too preoccupied with what had just happened. Nathan acted like nothing was wrong, laughing and joking with my mom like he hadn't just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I forced a smile, pretending to be okay, but inside, I was falling apart. After dinner, Mom suggested we play cards, but I quickly excused myself, claiming I was tired. I wasn't. I just needed to get away, to breathe. I locked myself in my room, leaning against the door as my mind raced. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. But what scared me the most wasn't Nathan's twisted game. It was how much a part of me wanted to keep playing. The next morning, I woke up early, hoping to avoid Nathan. I made my way down to the lake, the cool morning air doing little to calm my nerves. I sat on the dock, staring out at the water, trying to clear my mind. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me. Couldn't sleep either? His voice cut through the silence like a knife, sending a jolt of fear through me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. "What do you want from me, Nathan?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the gentle lapping of the water. He stepped closer, his presence looming over me like a dark cloud. "I think you know exactly what I want." I stood up abruptly, finally turning to face him. "Stay away from me," I snapped, my voice shaking with anger and fear. He smirked, taking a step closer. "You don't really want that, Layla." I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, we heard Mom's voice calling from the cabin. Nathan's smirk faded, replaced by that calm, composed mask once again. He turned and walked back towards the house, leaving me standing there, my heart racing, my mind spinning. The rest of the day was a blur. I avoided Nathan as much as possible, but no matter where I went, he was always there, lurking just out of sight. I felt like I was going insane, trapped in this twisted game with no way out. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't going to stop, not until one of us crossed the line. And I wasn't sure which one of us it would be. The drive back from the cabin felt like an eternity. The silence in the car was suffocating, broken only by my mom's occasional humming to some old song on the radio. Nathan drove with his usual calm, his hand steady on the wheel, but I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. Every time I caught his eyes in the rearview mirror, my stomach twisted into knots. He didn't have to say anything. I knew this wasn't over. Back home, things quickly spiraled out of control. Nathan didn't even try to hide it anymore. It started with subtle things, fleeting touches when Mom wasn't looking, standing too close in the kitchen, his hand brushing against my back as he reached for something. Then came the notes. Short, cryptic messages slipped under my bedroom door or left on my pillow. "I see you. We both know what you want." Each one sent a wave of panic through me, but there was something else too, something darker. a curiosity I couldn't shake. I tried to avoid him, spending more time at Jenny's, crashing on her couch just to get away from that house. But every time I came back, the air felt thicker, heavier, like the walls themselves were closing in on me. And Nathan? He was always there, waiting, watching. One night, after a late shift at work, I came home exhausted. I wanted nothing more than to shower and crawl into bed, but as I stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in just a towel, I felt it. That prickle on the back of my neck, like someone was there. I turned my head slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The door to my room was slightly ajar, just enough. I didn't see him, but I knew. He was watching. I slammed the door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it as I tried to catch my breath. My mind was spinning. This couldn't go on. I needed to do something. But what? Tell Mom? Would she even believe me? Nathan had this way of twisting things, making you doubt your own reality. And the worst part was, a small, twisted part of me wasn't even sure I wanted it to stop. Days turned into weeks, each one more unbearable than the last. I started coming home later and later, hoping to avoid him entirely. But it didn't matter. The tension was always there, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting to explode. And then came the night of their anniversary. Mom was over the moon about it, gushing about the reservation Nathan had made at some fancy restaurant downtown. She wanted us to celebrate together, like one big happy family. The thought of sitting across from him at dinner made me sick, but I didn't have a choice. So I played along. But if I had to suffer through that night, I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I pulled out the red dress, the one Mom hated, the one that hugged every curve of my body like a second skin. As I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the fabric, I felt a strange surge of power. If Nathan wanted to play games, fine. But two can play. When I walked down the stairs, Mom's eyes widened. "Oh, Layla," she frowned. "Don't you think that's a little much?" But Nathan froze. His eyes raked over me, slow and deliberate, and in that moment, I saw it. That flicker of something dangerous, something raw. His mask slipped, just for a second, and it sent a thrill down my spine. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice low, smooth as silk. I forced a smile, pretending not to notice the way Mom's eyes darted between us. "Thanks," I replied, my voice steady, even though my heart was racing. Dinner was a nightmare. The restaurant was dimly lit, with soft jazz playing in the background, but the tension at our table was anything but subtle. Mom chatted away, oblivious, while Nathan's eyes never left me. Every time I shifted in my seat, I felt his gaze on my skin, like a touch I couldn't escape. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. I splashed cold water on my face, gripping the edge of the sink as I stared at my reflection. What was I doing? This was insane. I needed to get out of there before things went too far. But when I stepped out of the bathroom, he was there, waiting. Nathan leaned against the wall, his hands in his pockets, his eyes dark and unreadable. "What are you doing?" I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one could see us. He pushed off the wall, closing the distance between us in 2 slow steps. "You know exactly what I'm doing," he murmured, his voice low, dangerous. "And you're not stopping me." I tried to move past him, but he caught my wrist, his grip firm but gentle. My breath hitched in my throat, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. "This isn't a game, Nathan," I whispered, my voice trembling. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing against my ear. "Isn't it?" I yanked my hand free, my skin burning where he touched me. Without another word, I turned and walked back to the table, my mind spinning. Mom looked up as I sat down, her brow furrowing in concern. "Are you okay, sweetheart? You look a little pale." I forced a smile, nodding quickly. "I'm fine. Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was anything but fine. Because I knew, deep down, that this night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I was right. After dinner, as we walked back to the car, Nathan let Mom get in first, holding the door open for her like the perfect gentleman. But as I moved to slide into the back seat, he stopped me. His hand brushed against my lower back, lingering just a second too long. "You coming?" Mom called from inside, oblivious to the silent exchange happening inches from her. Nathan's eyes met mine, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sure I wanted to stop him. The drive home was silent, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. When we finally pulled into the driveway, I practically bolted from the car, mumbling something about being exhausted. I didn't wait for a response. I just needed to get inside, to lock my door and figure out what the hell I was going to do. We got home late. The ride back from the restaurant was tense, suffocating. My mom was buzzing from the wine and the evening, completely oblivious to the silent war unfolding between Nathan and me. She hummed along to some old love song on the radio while Nathan's hand rested casually on the steering wheel, his knuckles occasionally brushing against my knee in the back seat. Each touch was deliberate. Each glance in the rearview mirror was a challenge. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt like I could finally breathe again, but that relief was short-lived. Mom yawned and stretched as she stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement. "That was wonderful," she said, her voice warm and sleepy. "I'm heading to bed. You two should relax a bit." I watched her disappear up the stairs, her figure fading into the darkness of the hallway. The sound of her bedroom door closing echoed in my ears, and just like that, we were alone. The living room was dimly lit, the glow from the streetlight outside casting long shadows across the walls. I sank into the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't have to wait long. Nathan walked in, his footsteps slow, measured. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me from across the room. The tension was unbearable. Finally, he moved. He crossed the room in a few strides, and before I could react, his hand was on my cheek. His touch was warm, almost gentle, but the weight of it felt like 1,000 bricks pressing down on me. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, the world felt like it was standing still. This was the moment. The line we both knew we were about to cross. But I wasn't the one who was going to fall. I slowly reached for my phone, keeping my eyes locked on his. His gaze flickered, confusion flashing across his face for just a second. And then, I pressed record. The red light blinked at the corner of my screen, capturing everything. The way his hand lingered on my skin, the hunger in his eyes, the dangerous closeness between us. His expression shifted. The confident, smug look he always wore faltered. "What are you doing?" His voice was low, but I could hear the edge of panic creeping in. I smiled, stepping closer until there was barely any space between us. "Did you really think I'd let this continue?" I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Game over, Nathan." For a moment, he just stared at me, his mouth opening like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I could see it, the realization sinking in, the power shifting between us. I pulled back, my heart pounding in my chest, and walked upstairs without another word, leaving him standing there, frozen in place. The next morning was eerily quiet. Nathan was gone. No note, no explanation, just gone. I didn't need to ask where he went. I already knew. I sent the video to my mom while she was still asleep. I didn't wait around to see her reaction. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and left the house. But even with Nathan gone, the weight of what happened didn't disappear. It lingered, heavy and suffocating, a constant reminder of how close I had come to losing myself in his twisted game. And the worst part? In this story, there were no winners, just survivors. What would you have done?